Demon Kissed, Final Part, Aaron and Everyone Else, Chapter 28. Did you ever hear that the very act of feeding for a vampire gives them access to the mind of the one they feed on? No? Then perhaps I have said too much and need to go now, before we go much further. A quote from Nicodemus Grant. Aaron walked past Cade carefully in the doorway, making sure she didn't make contact with his body again, and breathed a sigh of relief as she re-entered the gallery. It had been a big mistake to follow him in there, and she knew it. Honestly, what the hell had possessed me to follow Cade into Dominic's bedroom? Why did I think it was a bright idea to enter the admittedly open bathroom door, then spend 15 minutes staring off into space at this stupid clipboard and talking to him? She wondered, putting the clipboard back on the shelf by the stereo and brushing her hands over her tingling hips. Then shivered slightly and bit back a moan. I don't get what's happening, but I sure as hell find it confusing and wish it would level out or something. I don't know how much more I can take before I sleep with one of these guys. Ever since the night I fought that walker with Alistair's help, I've been getting these weird, erotically painful shocks every time I come into contact with nearly everyone in the two houses, and I really don't know if I like it or hate it. Waking to find herself residing in Alistair's home had been a bit of a shock to her. She had figured that he would have just dropped her back at camp like he had before, and having Alistair that close was more of an emotional temptation than she had wanted to acknowledge while she was healing. Then there was the little panic-inducing matter of figuring out last week that she had been lying to herself for a long time. She had kept telling herself for years that she only liked Alistair, that since she didn't really know him, she couldn't possibly be in love with him. And then he had quit coming by her room to check up on her recovery while she was still healing. That had hurt more than she wanted to admit, and she still didn't know what she had said or done the last time they talked that had made him leave her alone like that. She hadn't dared look into his thoughts to find out what she'd done. She'd been afraid of what she might see, and she had felt so confused by her own emotions. Space to sort out how she felt was all she had wanted when she was healed enough to move on her own, and it had been Aaron's #1 reason for leaving Alistair's beautiful mansion and coming here to train with Dominic. Only it hadn't helped. She had missed the sound of his voice talking to someone in the hall outside her room, and she had missed the occasional glimpse of him either returning to or leaving the mansion from her window. The hard truth was, she had missed him. Period. When Alistair was all she could really think about for 3 days after Merrick was hurt, she had begun to realize that she really was deeply in love with Alistair, and after what had happened this morning, she knew it for a fact. And the scary thing was, it wasn't just Alistair she was in love with either. She was in love with Merrick as well. Aaron also had the feeling that she was getting close to falling for Dominic and Cade too. Though she had only known them for a few short days, she even felt something for the women, and she had only just met them 2 days ago. Her life had been going to hell for 3 months, with the exceptions of her kids and Isaac, but she had been dealing with it, and she even now knew that her mother and brother were still alive. Or at least she knew Graham was still alive. She had seen him off and on over the years in various parts of Outer City while out on patrol, and more recently leaving Alistair's home. She hadn't really questioned the why or how of it. She was just glad that she still had her big brother and hoped her mom was still alive as well. I just wish I knew what the hell I'm supposed to do with my feelings for these guys. Was I supposed to choose between them? Was it possible to be in love with more than one person and to be with them all? Was I supposed to just walk away and pretend that I felt nothing when one of them was hurt? She wondered, moving toward a beautifully done painting of Dominic's Lay, and looked at it critically, comparing the long-dead woman with herself again. She came up short in comparison on all counts and sighed dejectedly. Erin had curves, but not like Leigh had had. She was very short. Leigh had been very tall. Her hair was currently jet black. Leigh's had been dark red. She was pretty. Leigh had been gorgeous. Leigh had been a fierce warrior who had lived to fight, and Erin just wanted to get to the point where she could stop fighting and be able to sleep at night without keeping a knife or gun under her pillow. Leigh had been a military leader. She preferred to just follow. Leigh had been graceful, strong, lithe, lethal, a princess, and Erin was just an average human with no special abilities other than a small bit of active telepathy, the uncontrolled gift of telekinesis, and the ability to piss off everyone around her or cause trouble for them. Oh, who the fuck am I kidding? Leigh had been a goddess given mortal form to the men and women around her. I'm just me. I'm only human. I can't change that, nor would I want to, even for someone I loved with all my heart. She thought, and felt her heart beginning to break for the things she probably would never have. The love of someone else special to her, children of her own, and a home like this one, or like Alistair's. A home filled with love, laughter, and family. The image of a silver-eyed little boy with Alistair's white blonde hair popped into her head, and she closed her eyes, letting herself dream for a moment. But when she opened them again, the dream image was replaced by the very real picture of the woman that everyone in the house had loved so very much so long ago, the woman she had been forever ago, and she felt tears of frustrated defeat prick her eyes. She couldn't be that woman again, not for anyone, even herself. Kate watched Erin as she studied the painting of Leigh with a slight frown on her pretty face, and reached out telepathically to Nick when she pressed her hand to her chest, then closed her eyes. "What is she thinking as she looks at that painting? She seems a little upset," he said, as her shoulders slumped a moment later, and she rubbed her throat absently. She turned away from the painting and looked around at the rest of the art in the gallery. The look he saw in her eyes as she turned could only be described as one of lonely longing, but there was pain and disappointment there, too. She is thinking things that she should not be at this time. Cade, you need to get her to the club, and get her distracted. Now, before she decides to take off and leave the entire city," Nick said in response to his inquiry, and he stiffened at the ring of command in Nick's voice. "I ain't your bitch, Nick. I only work at your club because I want to, not because you hired me, and do not forget, vampire, I wouldn't even be here if not for my promise to Leigh," he said, and moved from the bedroom doorway to Erin's side. "I forget nothing, Cade. Least of all, how much we all owe Leigh for getting your word, or how much I owe you for your help and my sanity," Nick replied, and he relaxed a bit. "We really do need to get to the club, Erin," he said softly, and touched her arm lightly. "Fine. Where is it, and how are we getting there?" she said in a tone that was businesslike and lacked any of the warmth she had shown him earlier in the bathroom when they had been talking before. She moved away from him again and turned to face him. "Fantasy isn't far, and I had been going to shadow travel. But perhaps you would prefer to walk?" he said, and saw interest light her green-blue eyes for a second before it was gone again. "Walking would probably be best, Lord Blackbriar," she said, and he winced. Just a few minutes ago she had been calling him by his first name, and now she was calling him Lord Blackbriar. "Well then, let's get going. We still need to get you an outfit and rehearse for the show," he said quietly, turning away from her and heading for the stairs. "Cade, I'm sorry," she said to his back, and he paused on the first step to glance back at her. "Sorry? For what, Erin?" If you would rather walk instead of going by magic, I understand, and will walk with you to show you the way there. As far as I see it, you have nothing to be sorry about," he said, shrugging, and descending the stairs, leaving her to either keep up or catch up as she saw fit. "No, Kate, that's not what I meant. I wasn't strictly telling you the truth earlier when you asked if I could still dance, and I want to apologize for that. The truth is, I haven't danced in 13 years, and I'm going to need time to practice our routine," she said, and touched his arm lightly as she caught up with him on the third-floor landing. Cade went completely still on the inside at her touch and took a deep breath, then stopped moving entirely when he realized he couldn't catch her scent. "I didn't hear her moving behind me, either," he thought, with an odd mixture of surprise and renewed lust. He'd been fairly certain that she'd remain up there a few seconds longer than she had. There was something familiar about this feeling, and this conversation sounded familiar to him as well, and for a moment a vague sense of déjà vu tickled at the edges of his mind. He shook it off for now, though, and looked at her hand on his arm, then looked at her face, into her eyes. She looked nervous, excited, and apologetic all at once. Erin had meant what she said, and in a way she was also apologizing for calling him by his last name by using his first, he realized. "I mean it, Cade. He placed his finger over her mouth, interrupting her, and smiled a little. "I know you mean it, Erin. I could hear it in your voice, see it in your face. How much time do you need? Is there anything else you require?" he said. 2 hours? Maybe 3? Oh, a room full of mirrors would be great, and if you're willing to risk your feet, a partner who knows the moves would go a long way to shortening the time," she said in one breath, and Cade blinked, then chuckled. "A rather tall order for such a short lady, but I think I can manage it, and you don't need to worry about my feet. They have survived far worse than a small human woman stepping on them," he said with a wide smile, and winked. "You do realize that I can still kick Major Bad Guy butt, despite my height, right?" she asked. "Yes, I'm quite aware of that. Now, if we could be going?" he said, and held his hand out to her, palm up. She raised an eyebrow at him and smirked a little, but didn't hesitate to place her hand in his, which surprised him. He'd been expecting at least a little hesitation from her, considering her reaction to being held by him earlier. "If we need to get there faster than walking will get us there, use your magic, Cade," she said as they started down the stairs again, and he glanced at her. "You sure? We can get to the club faster if I shadow travel, but walking will get us there fast enough," he said, and stopped walking again when she tugged on his hand. "I'm sure, Cade. Take me through the shadows with you. Please? I know what I said a bit ago, but that was just me being chicken, and I really want to experience what it's like," she said, surprising him again, and then surprised him further by threading her fingers through his. "Why?" he asked, turning to face her on the stairs with his back to the railing, and she looked down at their hands for a moment before meeting his gaze squarely. "Because, with the exception of a few minutes pretty much every night spent in Alistair's company, the only magic I've experienced has been dark, dead, and vile. And though your magic feels dark to me, it's clean and alive somehow. I just want to feel it around me for a little while," she said, and shrugged, adding, "If you don't want to take me through the shadows tonight, I will look forward to tomorrow night and the night after if I have to." "That wasn't what I meant, but it will do," he said, and gathered her in his arms for the second time tonight. He'd meant why had she been afraid, not why she wanted him to take her through the shadows. But he figured that she had partly explained that, and thought he could figure out the rest later tonight. Erin wasn't sure what had prompted her to say that, but she was glad she had when Cade's strong arms closed around her and pulled her close to his chest again, despite the renewed tingling burn banding her hips. Letting her head fall back, she looked up at his face, noting the finely chiseled cheekbones, the straight nose, the high forehead, the absurdly long lashes that shielded his beautiful cobalt blue eyes from her, his full lower lip, and the thinner upper one. Cade wasn't just a handsome man. He was a gorgeous man. When she had seen him from the waist up in the bathroom, she had noted other things about him that only made him seem more desirable to her. Faint scars littered his nicely muscled chest and broad shoulders. A few long scars that resembled claw marks crossed his abdomen from his lower left ribs to just above his right hip. She had liked what she saw. She liked it very much, especially when he had bent over to retrieve his pants. Ooh, Mama, what a view that had been! The man had a butt made for squeezing. Not that she had much experience with male butt squeezing, or really even thought about men or any kind of love-making with them before now, and now that she had, she was going to see how far her courage would stretch. It hadn't shown itself when Alistair had had her pinned to a wall nearly 2 weeks ago. Sure, she'd felt a killer amount of lust at the time, but she had been too chicken to find out where they could have gone that night, and she regretted that. She regretted many things where that vampire was concerned, and she intended to rectify those regrets as soon as he was healed. In the meantime, she would take this time out dancing with Cade, enjoy it and his company, then see where they ended up when the sun came up. Whether they would just become good friends or turn into lovers in the near future, Erin wasn't sure. But she didn't want to regret another missed opportunity with someone she was attracted to, and was willing to find out. Even if she ended up with a broken heart at the end of this strange experience with these remarkable people, she was willing to risk it and actually live for the moment, instead of just existing in it like she had been for the last 3 months. Just this once, she wanted to know what it felt like to have fun again, before continuing her plans to destroy the one responsible for Lucy's death, and Cade seemed like the kind of guy who could and would show a girl a good time, even if all he got out of it was a good dance partner for the night. "You know what I really want to do tonight, Cade?" she asked, a tiny catch in her voice as he brought her even closer to his body, and she felt the tingle of magic filling the air around them on the stairs. He brought his head closer above her own and smiled a little smile. "No, Erin. Care to enlighten me?" he said, a teasing note in his deep, slightly rough voice that thrilled her on one level and scared her witless on another at the same time. When his arms tightened further, she knew he had heard the catch in her voice, and it made her wonder what it would be like to have him teasing her like this every day as her breath caught in her throat. Erin thought she might like that. The teasing in his voice as he spoke to her, anyway. She wasn't sure she could handle being held like this when he did it, though. It made her breathless and weak in the knees. She had heard him and Dominic teasing each other mercilessly the other night as they sparred, and she had thought they had sounded like siblings. She wanted to be a part of that, wanted to call this place, these people, her home, and she wanted to be able to be herself with them, like she had with Lucy. She wanted to find out what being in love was like again, and she wanted to know what it was like to make love to someone she cared about one more time. The simple truth was, Erin wanted to live her life for herself again, not just for vengeance, and she was beginning to want to live it with Alistair and his very big family. "What I really want to do is have a lot of fun dancing tonight with you, and the freedom to be me on the dance floor. I think you're the kind of guy who can do that, and one who can be happy with just a good dance partner for the night. Am I right?" she said softly, and wrapped her arms around his waist when he made to pull back a little. "If that's what you want tonight, I'm your man," he said, nodding, then grinned lecherously and added, but I wouldn't be adverse to doing anything else you may want to do." She chuckled and then gasped when he stepped backward into a shadow near the railing, lifting her off of her feet and up against his chest as he did so. Everything around her went pitch dark, but after only a second there was light again, and she found herself in the shadows outside of a very familiar club. "So that's what the name of this place is," she said as Cade set her on her feet again and looked over his head up at the 14-story, city-block-wide building. "You know the club?" he asked, and she nodded. "I worked security here for one night when I was 17. Cap never mentioned the name of the club, though, and I was too busy keeping an eye on my part of the room to really look at the signs. I've been back here off and on since then, but still never took the time to read the sign," she said, then added with laughter in her voice, "You can let me down now, Cade. I'm perfectly balanced." Cade reluctantly released her completely from his arms and offered her his left arm after she had taken 2 steps back from him. Erin cocked her head to the side, and she looked him over thoughtfully while his back was to the gigantic building. Her eyes widened, and she started laughing as she moved around him and placed her left hand on his right forearm, just above his wrist. The grin that she graced him with as she looked up at him took his breath and made his gut tighten. The sheer joy reflected in her laughter did something strange to his chest and made him want to share that joy with her. "Does something about the way I look strike you as funny?" he asked. "Nope. I just remembered that we met the night I was working security here. The way you look right now, with the red and green neon flashing behind you, just reminded me of it, that's all," she said, bumping her head against his arm and chuckling. "The way I look reminded you of when we met when?" he asked curiously, then added, "I'm not saying I doubt what you're saying, Erin. But I have trouble keeping track of everything that happens when I'm at work, and I barely remember my name by the end of the night half the time." "I don't blame you for forgetting that goddamn security nightmare on floor 13, Block D," she said, and shuddered dramatically. Then she pouted and added, "Though I would have thought you'd have remembered the only chick that turned you down flat when you asked her to dance that night." "No, I'm sorry, Erin. I'm afraid I don't remember," he said, shaking his head. "Maybe if I do what I did that night, you'll remember," she said, and stepped in front of him. "What are you—" Erin put her hand on his chest and one finger to her lips, interrupting him, then took 3 steps back. She cocked her right hip, put her hand on it, and stared at him for a moment, then said in a sarcastic tone, "I'm sorry, baby, but I'm working. Go find a girl who came here for some fun and games." She dropped her pose and stepped back to his right side. Cade stared at her for a long moment, trying to remember, then burst out laughing when the memory came to him. He turned and swept her up into his arms for a second. His touch, as he spun her around in a circle, stole her breath, and the sound of his laughter made her smile. "What was that for?" she asked breathlessly when he put her down again. "For reminding me of one of the best and worst nights I have ever worked the club," he said, and chuckled, adding, "I did try to get your name from one of the guys you were with, but he refused to give me it. Was quite rude about it, actually." "Oh, really?" she asked, wondering who it had been and feeling a deep flash of hurt that everyone was gone. "Well, not everyone. Just the only older friends and family I'd had for 13 years, she thought, and shook her head. "This is no time to think about that, girl. Get your ass in gear and get to work. Dominic said that both Alistair and Merrick would be fine once they had rested for a few days. The kids are well protected by everyone in Alistair's mansion and will be safe for once." she chastised herself, and looked up at Cade, feeling the latent strength in the arm he draped loosely over her shoulders as he began leading her to the huge front doors to the lobby, and felt safe, truly safe, for the first time that she could remember in a long time. I remember part of what happened that night, but not much. The part I never forgot was watching the way you moved on the floor that night, Cade. And I hadn't really wanted to turn you down, she admitted, then added quietly, but I was desperately trying to follow Cap's orders that night, so that he would let me stay on the team. Why? Was he going to kick you off the team, or something like that? He asked curiously, and reached to open the right-hand door. I got it, she said, then and added sadly, he was going to send me to Inner City. Why the hells would Jude have done that? He asked incredulously. Ah, so you knew him. Frank told him that I was refusing to follow orders, she said, and shrugged, forcing him to readjust his arm over her shoulders. Rosen was a douche, Aaron. I cannot believe that Jude would have believed him over you, he said, and she gave a hollow laugh. I was 17, Cade. Who the fuck in their right mind would take the word of a teenager they barely know at face value over the written and spoken word of someone they had known for years? She said bitterly, as he ushered her into the elevator, and he could feel the tension in her shoulders when she stepped into the small enclosed space. Claustrophobic? He asked, hoping the question would keep her from dwelling on bad memories, and pulled her back against his front, holding her close to him. A little. Have been since Graham accidentally locked me in the tool shed when I was 6, she said, and tipped her head back to look up at him before adding, I know he's still alive, you know. Who? He asked, staring at her lips and wondering what she would taste like if he kissed her. Cade, pay attention. Aaron is moving into dangerous territory with that observation, and you need to tread carefully here, my friend. If you say just the right thing at the wrong time... Nick's voice sounded in his mind, and he nearly growled. Gods damn it, Nick. I know what the hell's I'm doing here. I learned this trick with Leigh, and it works every time to get a woman to talk. Trust me, Cade snapped in his mind. My brother, Graham. I know he's still alive. I've seen him off and on over the years all over the city. I think you know him, Cade, and I'm glad he has friends like you and Dominic, she said as the doors opened on the only stop it had, Fantasy's first dance floor, Lucifer's Pit, on the 13th floor, and stepped away from him. Aaron, did I say something wrong? He asked, and caught her hand in a gentle grip before she could get too far away from him. The last thing he wanted right now was for her to get lost in the building. She turned around to look at him in surprise, and then tugged on his hand, trying to pull him out of the elevator. Come on, Cade, let's go have some fun, she said, and grinned up at him. Aaron, I asked you a question. Aaron interrupted him by spinning gracefully into his body and jumping up to kiss him on the lips. Cinnamon coffee and scotch. I like. No, Cade, you didn't say anything wrong. I just want out of this little box, so I can hit this dance floor and see if I still have what it takes to conquer it, she whispered against his mouth, and easily broke his gentle hold on her slender wrist as she dropped back down to the floor. Wait, what just happened? He wondered a bit dazedly, and followed her out of the elevator. Aaron, why did you just kiss me? He asked in bemusement, and heard her chuckle in response as they crossed the reception check-in lobby. You weren't the only one who was curious, big boy, I've been wondering what you taste like since I was 17. Though, to be completely honest, your taste isn't the only one I've been wondering about over the years," her voice said, and though she didn't turn around to look at him as she spoke, he knew she hadn't said a word out loud. "No, I didn't. And before you ask, no, I'm not reading your mind on purpose," she said, and kept walking toward the tall, dark red doors at the end of the second hallway off of the check-in lobby. Cade watched the way she moved, noting the seductive sway of her hips, the predatory glide of her to her even stride, and noted, too, that her steps fell in time to the faint sound of booming bass from up ahead. "Boss, I think I may be in trouble here," he thought to Nick, and swallowed hard when he finally looked all the way down to her feet and saw the 5-inch high-heeled combat-style boots she was wearing. "That woman is walking way too easily in those shoes, Nick. I may need some backup out here," he said, noting that the beat was getting faster and louder, and that Erin was moving faster as well.